Support for the Other Side of Coachella series on Empire PBS comes from the California Endowment, promoting a positive economic environment for underserved individuals and communities, and promoting fundamental improvements in health status of all Californians. More information at calendow.org.
Mi Coachella Valley está hambriento.
Mi Coachella Valley quiere salir adelante.
Quiere lograr un cambio.
Dates, grapes, and love.
The issues that are affecting Coachella are issues that are affecting the entire state that requires, I think, a transformation in our cultural values. I think the state of California needs to continue the work that says that every single person that is here needs to have a rightful claim to living a dignified and fair life.
You know, the reason why people who grow up in poverty are disadvantaged, it's not so much because they grow up in poverty, it's really because of how poverty is treated.
The big economic transformations, at least the way that we think of the Coachella Valley, begins around the time period of the 1890s. From the 1890s to the 1930s, you have a new wave of white settlement. There's a long history in the US of westward expansion with this idea that the landscape was undeveloped, not utilized appropriately, and that they, the pioneer, would civilize the landscape that usually is described as a wasteland. Coachella's economy, though, transforms in the post-war period. So after World War II, Coachella receives a canal structure, right, that allows it to have a lot more water, and we have a tremendous explosion in agriculture. If you go from 18,000 acres of irrigated fields to about 62,000 acres in about 15 years, your biggest problem is going to be how to acquire enough labor in order to work those fields. Immigrants and migrants are pretty much the lifeblood to the economy as it's growing. So you have Japanese families working in agriculture from the very beginning, Filipino workers, Mexican workers, continuing onwards into the post-World War II period. And then today, anywhere you go, you're going to find immigrant families, right? They're working in our hotels, in our restaurants, at Coachella Music Festival. You can't have Coachella without immigrants.
You made that today? Yeah. Damn, that's good. Right now.
My grandparents migrated here from my dad's side to follow the harvest of the citrus. So I've been living here since birth. I grew up in Mecca, and now I live in Coachella.
My parents immigrated from Colima, Mexico. So I grew up with this affinity of loving the desert, going to Box Canyon, Salton Sea, and then even exploring the gated communities through the work that my parents have, which is their gardening business. That is, as a family business, that means family goes.
So at the same time that there's this economic explosion in the east side, on the west side you have the development of high-end resort living, and the majority of these people are coming out of LA. And then this is how we start to develop an economy that is kind of bifurcated. You have a resort living on one side, and then you have a deeply agricultural predicated economy on the other side.
People are coming out from the East Coast and have homes that sit there for months on end, and somebody goes and clean it, and the chances are that the people that are cleaning that very luxurious place is probably living in the side of the Coachella Valley that is most affordable. And so further east, you'll find lower rent, less policing. I would even go as far as saying less interest and investment.
I've tried to focus more on the things that are disproportionately impacting the immigrant community here and also the worker community. A lot of it has been about anti-discrimination in different contexts, and then we've also really expanded our practice of immigration because it's a huge need and gap here in the Coachella Valley.
I kind of grew up in the city of Palm Springs. All my family who lived here with me when I was growing up have been pushed east. It's only been until recently that I've been able to connect to the work that's happening there. So it's been really eye-opening to be a part of the space in which people are working and try to do my part to contribute. As a person who resides on the west side, as a person who has more access to resources than my brothers and sisters who live, just 20 to 40 miles down the way on the 10.
Even just the ratio of primary care doctors to patients is vastly different between the east and the west sides of the valley. So there's a recognition of that I think has really occurred over the last few years. We're starting to look at things as one Coachella Valley, which is one reason why the healthcare district, which is now only in the west Coachella Valley, is seeking to expand to the east.
You have these pockets of people that have settled in these eastern Coachella communities that are not cities. They literally are just unincorporated communities. You also have everyone that works out in agriculture living out here. So we know that if you're working, even if you're working hospitality, you're probably still making minimum wage. If you're working in agriculture, you're definitely making minimum wage, working long hours. I mean, some of the times they're working by contract where, you know, they might not necessarily be even making minimum wage.
I remember growing up feeling that there was something unfair, about living in a community of such hardworking people who worked the fields, you know, from morning till evening, came home tired, and that we still couldn't have access to decent living, to just things that many other people get for granted.
Living in a rural community, it's hard to find places for us to even to skate and things like that. In our trailer park, there was no asphalt. In Mecca, I mean, obviously, only the school was our go-to. And when we wanted to go out in the area to the west side, it would take us 2 to 3 hours just to, you know, find a spot for us to skate. So I think skateboarding allowed me to really get to know the Coachella Valley in a different way. But I think it also gave us opportunity to figure out, you know, what is it that I'm missing in my own communities that we can incorporate here.
Our communities and our community leaders were very adverse to and resistant to the involvement of people from what we saw as the outside. And that is, of course, rooted in our experiences of being disregarded or disrespected by people from the outside who've wanted to take control of our efforts and our movements at different points. I think one of the greatest pieces of growth for our initiative is that we've been able to recognize that there is value in outside contribution to our communities, as long as we're the ones deciding how those, you know, relationships are built and how they're applied.
Organizations like BHC, and especially under the leadership that is at play right now, I think that they're playing a role very similar to the civil rights movement, which is they're going to the communities, identifying leaders, and then trying to facilitate their growth in order so that the community itself can be able to advocate for itself. And I think that that's key. I don't think we can have any kind of organization that thinks that they can lead people. People kind of lead themselves.
When I had the opportunity of working for building healthy communities, it was just this radical idea of how things could be done differently. Right? And I bought onto it. I said, yes, we need to try a different approach, an approach that brings community residents to have a seat at the table.
There is work that's creating a lasting impact, and it needs to continue beyond just funding provided by certain funders. And so the community has come together and said, we really value what's happening here, and we can't let it end. And so to that end, BHC is transforming itself to Alianza, which is more rooted in the community.
We're at a point where we're really functioning as an alliance. We are a group of residents, nonprofit organizations that are coming together under one vision, and that is really to see healthy, thriving communities in the Coachella Valley. Alianza works as the platform to allow the needs of the communities uplifting, match them with the technical expertise from nonprofit organizations and others, and really create this output that is a policy or a systems change. And then, you know, the cycle continues, and really at the core of it is this leadership development. How are we in the process developing leaders so that this process can continue? So Alianza has 3 main issue-based campaigns. They are a campaign for a positive school climate, it's an environmental justice campaign, and a trauma-informed care campaign. In the Coachella Valley, there's always, the notion out there that our schools are underperforming, right? That there's low graduation rates, low college going rates. Everyone that I talk to from this community has an interest in seeing that change. So we started having that conversation with the parents. And what they wanted to see was higher graduation rates, less suspensions and expulsions. So we started talking about, well, what does that mean? And like everyone, it was first, let's focus on more rigorous academics, let's offer more A through G, and all of that is great, but then as we start having the conversation, it was like, well, what really is at the core of this? What's at the root?
There has been conversations that the students do not feel comfortable sometimes coming into the school. They don't feel like the schools are their home. They don't feel like some teachers are there to support them.
The teachers were not relating to the students or their parents, and there was a big culture clash. And so basically in our workshop what we tried to do is get them to understand some of the challenges that the families had in order to survive.
What led me to go seek that master's degree was really what I was experiencing in my own classroom when I was a teacher. At a time when I saw the city of Coachella making decisions about what types of homes they were bringing, $500,000 homes, I had students who didn't have a bed where to sleep.
A lot of the teachers at the time were out of region. They did not grow up in the community. They didn't understand some of the challenges that maybe migrant workers were going through. And getting an A or even getting a C on an assignment wasn't as important than to put food on the table.
We had to ask or contend with the question of what's driving our kids away, right? And what is making it difficult for them to even show up to school? And what do they need so that they can show up to school? And that's where we landed with restorative justice.
You guys are like a family now, right? Woohoo!
And restorative justice is getting people to talk, learning about each other, and learning how to overcome maybe some of the challenges or some of the conflicts through conversation.
It was really about creating an environment that is positive, that is welcoming, and that would understand that our students do not check out their personal experiences at the door when they enter the classroom.
I have been so impressed with the parents stepping up in order to bring accountability to this educational process. They're invested. And the community stepping in and saying, we will support you. And a lot of the parents, the first thing they always tell me, I'm not educated. But the power, the leadership that these parents have, you can see it. And education is one piece, but the passion is another. You can say, I get a little emotional because they're very passionate.
Se supone que la escuela pública se debe a nuestros estudiantes y a nosotros los padres.
Es lo que a mí me apasiona, empoderar, informar a padres, decirles sus derechos. Muchos padres no saben que tienen derechos, igual a los jóvenes. Muchos jóvenes no hablan y yo les digo, tienen derecho tanto estudiante como padres.
Anytime you have the community involved, their children are going to go places.
He visto padres que levantan más la mano. He visto padres que se sienten ya con el derecho de hablar y de que pueden opinar y de que pueden participar.
Residents, whether they are youth or adults, all that they are looking for is an opportunity to be heard because they want their communities to improve.
So even if you're a senior, we're going to continue checking in with you to make sure that the pipeline exists, whether you're going to college.
What we want to do is reproduce the success of the students from the Youth Organizing Council that are going up to college and bringing it back to the schools. Not to say that restorative justice is the only tool or the only medium, but we have seen a great interest in students getting back into education just because they see the connection to their lives and everything else around them.
I'm graduating tomorrow, and my motivation was my community and my parents. I want to pursue my career because I want to make the rest of their life comfortable. That way they don't have to worry about waking up at 4 a.m. and going to work. But I want to hold an upper position to be their voice. I know there's a lot of infrastructure going on, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. For example, healthcare and things like that.
My plan is to go to college to take advantage of the free tuition for 2 years that they're giving here. And from there, transfer to UCR, UC Riverside, to be able to get my environmental science degree and be able to just come back and help out my community with a lot of things that are going on, especially with the Salton Sea.
The Salton Sea, because of a rural to urban water transfer, is quickly drying up.
Not only do we have the issue of a shrinking sea, which is exposing land to dust, and dust in the air, which has a particulate matter that can affect people with lung disease, but you also have the issue of, because the sea is now mostly fed by runoff irrigation and rainwater that goes to it, going through agricultural fields that use pesticides and chemicals and things like that, you have toxic issues that you have to deal with.
The state last year came up with a 10-year plan on how to start mitigating some of the impacts of the drying sea.
You know, the problem with Salton Sea is one where we could talk about, well, nothing's happened. It's been forever since anything's been going on. Like today, there are a lot of things happening. In fact, now we're saying, why can't this happen faster, right? We've got a plan, we've got some money, and we also have to make sure that we include the community that lives out there to tell us if we're moving in the right direction.
We're really looking at the environmental justice campaign and focusing it on the Salton Sea.
Before, the focus was more towards transportation and infrastructure, but the community really came back and said, listen, we know something is happening at the sea. We're not really too sure what it is, but we would like for you to go and find out, come back, report to us, and then put us at the table if change needs to happen.
By us being part of it now as Alianza, with the EJ campaign, we're bringing in the community's perspective, which is surprising to see that hasn't been the conversation all along. But at the same time, it's not surprising knowing that many community members are not aware that there is a plan to rehabilitate the sea. We're gonna have a community science component where the youth are gonna be understanding the science of what's happening at the Salton Sea through balloon mapping and doing aerial pictures and documenting them through a period of 2 years. And the reason why is because in our side where there's more people, there's less documentation of it. So for us, partnering up with institutions and informing also the Cal EPA and having all those connections through the partners to make sure that the data that the youth are collecting is something that it's gonna be respected once it's presented.
You can find chemicals from like mercury to DDT, which is a chemical that was used in farmlands, illegal to use, but it's still there. And all of these chemicals, you breathe them in when like gusts of winds come in, and they can cause a lot of respiratory illnesses. Some that my sister was born with, and my brother's suffering from them as well.
One statistic to note is that the young people that live on the south side of the sea, in the Imperial County, 7 out of 10 kids suffer from respiratory disease problems. By doing nothing, we would exacerbate that significantly. And so it's important that we keep in mind the public health and well-being of the people that live out there.
Todos los niños, inclusive nosotros los papás, tenemos problemas de alergias. Sobre todo cuando hay muchos vientos, la alergia se hace mucho más fuerte durante esos días para todos. La mayoría de los niños en las escuelas sufren de asma debido a esto. Así que es algo bien grave que nos afecta no solamente a nuestra comunidad, sino afecta a todas las comunidades alrededor de nosotros.
The people who live on the west side can't forget that we have a stake too. It's sort of in the back of our minds. It's sight unseen, right? But the moment that the sulfur smells, like come downwind to Palm Springs, that's when you hear folks complaining about it. We can't just be in it for ourselves. We can't just be in it for when an issue affects us.
We know that many of the communities around the lake don't have adequate infrastructure. This is an opportunity to bring in better roads and also an opportunity for parks. We don't have a lot of parks in our communities.
One of the projects that we're doing out here in North Shore is we, with the community, designed a recreational space. We call them public productive spaces. So it's more than a recreational space because we create programming. So we've worked with a group of women who are creating this pop-up vendor event at the park who will be selling food at affordable prices. And so what that is also doing is creating a local economy where otherwise there wouldn't be one.
If we're moving in the right direction, right? Some people may not understand why the plan is only focused on certain elements, public health and the ecosystem habitat. Maybe some people want to get a better understanding of when are we going to see boats out there and people fishing and people swimming, right? And so we've got to also talk about what phases of the Salton Sea efforts, we'll be able to see some of that. I mean, I think that's the long-term goal.
That it's important that there is a conversation about the people and public health in this situation.
We need to pay more attention to what's called the social determinants of health. And that not only includes income, whether you have a job or not, whether you have a house or not, whether you have an education, whether you have access to food, whether you have transportation. If somebody has health insurance, but they don't have transportation to get to the doctor or to the hospital, that's going to affect their health care.
The Trauma-Informed Care campaign is really about understanding what traumas look like and how they have manifested in our community, and really trying to figure out what a different form of care could look like.
Not only do we need to view each person holistically, but I believe we need to view the entire Coachella Valley holistically.
Folks that would go and seek help or seek services were often being triggered or re-traumatized because of their interaction with public services.
Traes ese trauma, algo que te pasó, ya sea una violencia, ya sea un abuso, algo, y que todavía te digan, pues es que necesito saber si tienes papeles o necesito saber si tienes aseguranza médica. Todo eso hace que la persona mejor no pida la ayuda, mejor se quede callada, mejor se quede con su trauma, porque esto hace que la persona, en vez de ayudar con lo que ya trae, se ponga peor.
Really, it was about understanding what those interactions were and what they could be, and really taking advantage of the momentum that was already happening. And so Riverside County, the Department of Public Health is already working on how to address trauma within their own county.
So we're working with several community organizations to make sure that we are able to come up with solutions to children that have experienced traumas such as physical abuse or not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, or bullying at school. So there's different factors that play this role when it comes to adverse childhood experiences.
Data and research will show like poverty really affects us in different ways, and the way that it manifests itself is violence. And so part of our team is made up of an organization called Líderes Campesinas.
Our local chapter has been doing conversations with our community about what are the problems that we still have with the environment, which is the pesticides. And we also talk about what is violence against women in the home and what is sexual violence against women in the workplace and the discrimination. And we're doing the house meetings, or we go to conferences, we present, or when we go to where meetings are already taking place and they invite us, we perform the theatrical skit. And then we do a reunión educativa in Spanish, which means educational meeting.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Mili Treviño Sauceda. ¿Cómo estamos?
Bien. Kind of like doing Tupperware parties. Instead of selling the product, we ask them, okay, can you invite people from from that you know of, and we're gonna come in and bring the theatrical skits, and then we're gonna give information, we're gonna give prices, and then we're gonna have food. So people come.
No les está rindiendo nada. ¿Qué pasó con ustedes ahora? ¿No traen ganas? Muévanse.
Quiero usar el baño. No han llegado al baño. ¿Quién se va? El baño.
Al rato, si no tienen ni una hora aquí, ya quieren irse al baño.
Pues es que ando mala del estómago.
Pues fíjense lo que coman antes de venir para acá.
Every time we have these kind of meetings, there's women coming forward.
Nos han dicho el que va a fumigar, váyanse ya del surco de allá para acá, porque acá ya vamos a fumigar, pero estamos en el mismo cuadro. ¿Qué es lo que quisieran que pasara?
We have an opportunity to fashion the way we deliver healthcare to the different communities here. We have to understand where they're coming from culturally, whether it's the foods they eat, or the community they're with, or how they deal with stress, or what their families are like. Those are all important things in terms of healthcare. And unless you're culturally competent, you can't really provide the healthcare that needs to be done.
My Coachella Valley accepts the beauty of our diverse communities.
My Coachella Valley is healing.
My Coachella Valley is coming together.
Is equitable.
It's beautiful and accepting.
Full of beautiful people.
Welcomes everyone.
And overall, to us, it's home.
Support for the Other Side of Coachella series on Empire PBS comes from the California Endowment, promoting a positive economic environment for underserved individuals and communities, and promoting fundamental improvements in health status of all Californians. More information at calendow.org.